The alien queen's daughter hugged me. The entire palace stopped breathing in the heart of Earth's capital, a world-renowned city filled with towering structures and bustling streets. The Earth Assembly gathered in emergency session. The news had come in a matter of hours. The Galactic Council had issued an ultimatum. The holographic projections of the council representatives hovered above the grand meeting hall, their faces grim and unyielding. Aiden Cole, a senior diplomat and one of Earth's brightest negotiators, stood at the front of the chamber. His fingers twitched nervously, adjusting the buttons on his suit jacket. He had always believed in diplomacy. After all, it had kept Earth at peace for generations. But this was something different. The Council, once seen as the neutral body that ensured balance in the galaxy, had drawn a line in the sand. Earth was to cede control of its outer colonies to the Zelthian Empire. Failure to comply would result in isolation from galactic trade, resources, and alliances. Worse yet, some had whispered about a military intervention. The threats were clear. At first, Aiden had hoped for a diplomatic solution. The Zelthians, a species of towering warriors, had been vying for Earth's resources for years. However, it was never supposed to go this far. The Council was meant to be a mediator, not a tyrant. And yet here they were, sending an army of diplomats with an iron fist disguised in promises of trade benefits. "We cannot stand for this," Aiden murmured, more to himself than anyone else in the room. He had seen these kinds of threats before, but never with such urgency. The assembly hall was filled with the hum of conversation as Earth's leaders debated their next steps. Some, like President Sophia Trelane, argued that submission to the Council's demands would ensure peace for Earth and its people. They reasoned that it was better to comply than to risk retaliation. But Aiden had always known that peace with the Council would come at a steep cost. Giving in to the demands meant Earth would lose its sovereignty. They would become nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game, controlled by the whims of the Council and the Zelthians. The debate raged on. Earth's politicians, diplomats, and military leaders all raised their voices, some for diplomacy, others for defense. Aiden's eyes kept flickering back to the holograms of the Council members, each one a symbol of a galaxy that had long outgrown humanity's influence. But the Council's demand was not only insulting, it was dangerous. Earth had worked hard for centuries to maintain its independence, and now the galaxy was telling them it no longer mattered. "We must resist," Aiden said finally, his voice cutting through the debate like a sword. "If we allow the Council to dictate our future, we will be signing our own death warrant. This will be the beginning of the end for Earth's autonomy." His words, though filled with resolve, did not bring the comfort he had hoped. Many in the room shifted uneasily, unsure whether to follow him. A few military leaders, like General Alara Miles, nodded in agreement. Aiden had worked alongside her in several peace talks, and she was known for her calm demeanor in times of crisis. Yet there was something in her eyes, a sharpness, a glint of anger that spoke volumes. "I've seen what the Zelthians do to planets they conquer," General Miles said, her voice low but firm. "And Earth is not going to be their next victim." Her words struck a chord with Aiden, but they also made the decision ahead feel heavier. General Miles was right. The Zelthians had a long history of subjugating weaker civilizations. Their empire was vast, their technology advanced, but they lacked one thing: human resilience. Aiden had always believed that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its technology, but in its spirit. Earth's people would fight to the last. Across the room, President Trelane addressed the assembly once more. She was a seasoned politician, but even she could not hide the weariness in her eyes. Her long-term strategy had always been to avoid conflict at all costs, but this situation was different. "We are not equipped to fight a war against the Zelthians," she said, her voice shaky. "We have to consider the ramifications of open rebellion. If we fight, we may lose everything: our colonies, our resources, our way of life. We cannot risk it." Aiden could see the fear in her eyes. She spoke of losses far greater than mere territory. This was about Earth's very future in the galaxy, and yet to him the fear was not about defeat. It was about what humanity would become if it chose to submit. "If we submit," Aiden said slowly, "we'll no longer be Earth. We'll be a vassal state, forced to bow to the whims of powers we cannot control. I say we resist. It's time for humanity to show the galaxy what we're made of." The room was silent for a long moment. Aiden's words had echoed in the hearts of many present, but fear still gripped the minds of others. What if they were wrong? What if the Zelthians were too strong, too powerful to challenge? Could humanity really stand against such an empire? General Miles stood, her posture proud and unwavering. She was a woman of action, and her resolve was infectious. "We have more than enough to fight back," she said, her voice rising with confidence. "Earth has hidden its power for too long, and I believe it's time we showed the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated. We don't need to bow to anyone." Aiden felt a surge of hope as he met her eyes. This is what humanity needed, a show of strength, a united front against the Council. If they could rally behind their cause, humanity could turn the tables. The galaxy would see that Earth was not a helpless world to be trampled on. The Zelthians would learn that humans would not be intimidated. Aiden turned to face President Trelling, his voice steady but firm. "The Council has crossed the line. We don't have the luxury of choosing peace anymore. We must act, or we risk losing everything we've worked for." The President took a deep breath. For a moment she seemed to hesitate, weighing the future of Earth against the growing tension of the moment. But then she nodded. It was a reluctant agreement, but it was an agreement nonetheless. "Very well," she said softly. "We will prepare for action." The words were a quiet but powerful declaration. The stage was set. Humanity had made its choice. The days that followed the emergency session were a blur of intense meetings, urgent strategies, and sleepless nights. Aiden Cole barely had time to catch his breath before the next phase of Earth's resistance was set into motion. The decision had been made. There would be no submission to the Galactic Council, no turning back. Earth would prepare for war, and every citizen, every leader, every soldier would play a part. General Alara Miles wasted no time. Her command center was a hive of activity. Across multiple screens, military officers worked tirelessly to coordinate Earth's defense efforts. Despite the daunting task ahead, there was a sharpness to Alara's focus. She had been through battles before, but this was different. This was not just about defending Earth, it was about making a statement to the entire galaxy. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. "We need every resource at our disposal," General Miles ordered. "Bring the hidden fleets online, initiate full-scale readiness on all fronts. If the Zelthians want war, we'll give it to them." Aiden was at her side, standing tall in his civilian suit, but his mind was miles away, absorbed in the overwhelming task ahead. As a diplomat, he had never been part of a military operation of this scale. The idea of war, of violence on such a scale, felt foreign to him, but it was the only path left. There was no room for hesitation now. "We have to remember," Aiden said, his voice low but firm, "that we fight for more than just survival. We're fighting for our freedom. We can't afford to let the Council dictate our future. If we win this, it won't just be Earth that gains power. It will be every world that's ever been oppressed by the Council." Alara nodded, her face hardening with resolve. "Agreed. This isn't just about Earth. It's about the future of every planet in the galaxy. If we bend now, we might as well sign our own extinction." The general's words echoed in Aiden's mind. Extinction. It was hard to imagine. Hard to think of Earth, his home, losing everything simply because it refused to kneel to the Council's demands. Within days, the human military began mobilizing. Every branch of the armed forces, every available ship, every advanced weapon was called into action. In the underground bunkers, workers scrambled to prepare humanity's secret weaponry. The technology that had been hidden for decades now had to be revealed, the carefully crafted designs that could change the course of galactic history. Aiden was there, watching as engineers and soldiers worked hand in hand, preparing ships that could cloak in deep space, weaponry capable of cracking open entire fleets, and defensive systems unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The sheer size and scope of humanity's preparation struck Aiden with awe. He'd known Earth's technological capabilities were advanced, but seeing it all come together in one massive, coordinated effort was something else. He couldn't help but feel a strange sense of pride. Despite all their differences, all the struggles, Earth was unified in a single cause. By the time the Zelthian fleet arrived in Earth's orbit, humanity was ready. The world watched, eyes trained on the skies as millions of Zelthian warships materialized, their colossal silhouettes blotting out the stars. Their arrival was a cold reminder of the threat that had brought them to this point. The Zelthians were formidable. Their ships were massive and heavily armored, their weapons capable of decimating entire fleets in seconds. And yet, as Aiden stood with General Miles in the command center, he felt something stirring within him. He knew that the odds were against them. But humanity had something that the Zelthians didn't: heart. "They're not expecting this," Alara said, her voice steady but with an edge of anticipation. "They think we'll crumble under their demands. Let's show them just how wrong they are." The first strike came without warning. A deep, resonating hum vibrated through the ground, and suddenly the human fleet, hidden in plain sight, emerged from the shadows of Earth's moon. Ships cloaked for days had been lying in wait, poised for the first strike. They launched in perfect formation, their stealth systems flickering as they pierced the atmosphere. With precise coordination, the human fleet descended upon the Zelthian ships, unleashing a barrage of firepower that tore through their defenses like paper. The Zelthians were caught completely off guard. Their ships, once towering symbols of invincibility, faltered in the face of humanity's fury. Plasma blasts struck their hulls with an intensity that shook their massive warships. In space, debris and smoke filled the vacuum as human-made weapons tore through Zelthian shields and armor. Aiden's heart raced as he watched the carnage unfold from the command center. Despite the initial shock, the Zelthians retaliated quickly. Their warships began to fire back, and soon the sky was filled with flashes of light as lasers and missiles collided in space. The battle had begun, and it was clear that this wouldn't be a quick fight. General Miles never wavered. She had prepared for this moment, and she was determined to see it through. "Keep the pressure on them," she commanded, her voice cold and calculated. "We have them on the defensive, but don't let up. This is our chance to show them what we're capable of." The battle raged on for hours, with human forces taking the fight to the Zelthians in ways they had never expected. Earth's fleet was smaller but faster, its ships maneuvering through the chaos with agility that the Zelthian ships could not match. Humanity's new weapons were devastating, but it was their strategy that made the difference. The Zelthians, with their overwhelming size and firepower, found themselves unable to keep up with the relentless pace of human ingenuity. Back on the ground, Aiden stood in the command center, his hands clenched into fists as he watched the battle unfold. This was his world, his people fighting for their future. He had spent years in diplomacy, trying to prevent conflict, trying to build bridges. And now, the very thing he had feared had come to pass. But it wasn't the devastation that tore at him. It was the realization that this fight, this war, wasn't about just survival. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity would not be treated like an inferior species. As the hours stretched on, the human forces began to gain the upper hand. One by one, the Zelthian ships began to fall, their once imposing fleets becoming little more than drifting wreckage in space. The Zelthians had underestimated humanity's strength, and now they were paying the price. But victory did not come without a cost. As the battle began to turn in humanity's favor, Aiden couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered in the pit of his stomach. He had watched too many lives lost, too many brave soldiers and officers who had fought to keep Earth free. Every death, every loss weighed on him, yet despite the tragedy, there was no turning back. Humanity had made its choice, and they would stand by it until the end. As the last of the Zelthian warships were destroyed, General Miles turned to Aiden, her face resolute but worn from the battle. "We've won the first round," she said, her voice a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. "But the war is far from over." Aiden nodded, his mind still reeling from the magnitude of what had just happened. "This is only the beginning. We'll show the galaxy that humanity is not a species to be underestimated." The unexpected victory had brought humanity a brief moment of relief, but Alara Miles knew it wouldn't last. The Zelthian fleet had been decimated, but the Council had vast resources. The immediate battle was over, but the war was far from won. General Miles stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the holographic map of Earth's defenses. The human fleet had been victorious, but at a high cost. The battle had taken its toll on their resources and manpower. Earth had won, but it would need to keep fighting if it wanted to secure its freedom. "We can't afford to let our guard down," Alara said, her voice steady despite the weight of their victory. "This was only a small part of what's coming." Aiden Cole, standing next to her, nodded in agreement. He had watched the battle unfold from the command center, his heart racing with every explosion and every victory. But now, in the aftermath, he was starting to feel the full weight of what had just happened. They had won the battle, but they had also made a powerful enemy. The Council and the Zelthians would not let Earth's defiance go unpunished. "We've made our point," Aiden said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "But the Council won't stop. They'll come for us again, harder this time. We have to be ready." Alara turned to face him, her eyes filled with the fire of a warrior. "We will be ready. But we need more than just strategy. We need to unite the rest of the galaxy. The Zelthians may have lost this battle, but there are others who will come for us. We can't win this alone." It was a harsh truth, but Aiden understood. Earth had always been a small player in the grand scheme of the galaxy, and though they had shown strength, the rest of the galaxy would not be so quick to side with them. The Council had their hands in every corner of the universe, controlling trade routes, resources, and alliances. Humanity's victory was only one battle in a much larger war. Aiden looked at the large map projected before them, outlining the movements of various factions in the galaxy. The Zelthian Empire might have suffered a blow, but other races loyal to the Council were already preparing for retaliation. And then there was the matter of Earth's own fleet. Despite the victory, they were still vastly outnumbered, and even with their advanced weapons, they couldn't face down the entire Council. "It's going to take more than just our fleet," Aiden muttered, more to himself than anyone else in the room. "We need allies." Alara glanced over at the map, studying the movements of the other factions. "I've already sent out requests for support to the Terran Coalition and the Sarnak Syndicate," she said. "But we're not exactly popular with them right now. Earth's defiance has put us on the radar of every power-hungry species in the galaxy." "I know," Aiden replied. "But we have to try. We need to show them that humanity is worth fighting for. If we can unite some of the smaller factions, maybe we can force the Council to rethink their position." The next few days were filled with uncertainty. Earth had won the first round, but the Council would not let that defeat go unanswered. Diplomatic envoys were sent out to rally support, but many species in the galaxy were still hesitant. The Zelthians were a powerful force, and many feared that crossing the Council would bring catastrophic consequences. Even among Earth's own allies, doubts began to surface. Some questioned whether Earth had the strength to keep fighting, while others wondered if submission was the better option. Aiden was well aware of the pressure mounting on every front. He spent hours speaking to leaders from various factions, trying to convince them that humanity's cause was just. But the truth was, humanity was still an unknown force in the galaxy. There was no guarantee that anyone would come to their aid. And then, as if to underscore the uncertainty of their situation, the first of the Zelthian retaliations arrived. A fleet of smaller warships, far from the scale of the main Zelthian force, appeared just outside Earth's atmosphere. These were not the heavily armed behemoths that had been destroyed, but fast, agile ships with advanced stealth capabilities. They were harbingers of the Zelthian Empire's response, a warning shot meant to remind Earth that their victory was temporary. "General Miles, we've detected multiple unidentified vessels entering our space," came a voice over the comms. "They're moving fast, stealth ships. They're too close to Earth." "How many?" Alara's voice was sharp, her expression unreadable. "Too many to count," the officer replied. "They're trying to get in close, but we're tracking them. We may need to scramble the fleet for another defense." Alara stood still for a moment, her mind racing. They had just won the first battle, but the Zelthians were not backing down. The war was far from over. "Initiate full defense protocols," Alara ordered, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "Get our fleet into position and launch the interceptors. We can't afford to wait for them to strike first." The command center erupted into activity as officers scrambled to implement the defensive measures. Aiden watched as the screens flickered with images of the incoming ships. The Zelthians were not taking their defeat lightly. They were coming back for vengeance, and this time they were bringing everything they had. Within moments, Earth's defense systems were engaged. The stealth ships, though harder to track, couldn't avoid the human fleet's laser-guided interceptors. The first few strikes hit their targets with devastating precision, sending Zelthian ships spiraling out of control. But more ships kept coming, and the battle once again erupted in the skies above Earth. Aiden clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the situation more acutely than ever. They had just started to recover from the last battle, and now they were facing another onslaught. It felt as though the galaxy had been thrown into chaos and Earth was caught in the middle of it all. But despite the pressure, despite the overwhelming odds, Aiden refused to back down. They had chosen this path. They had chosen to fight. And now they would see it through to the end. In the midst of the chaos, Alara's voice came through the comms once more. "We can't keep doing this forever. We need to hit back and we need to hit hard. These are only the first waves. If we don't take the fight to them, we'll be on the defensive forever." Aiden nodded, his mind racing as he considered their options. He knew that they needed more than just a defensive strategy. Earth had to strike back with force, with a message that would echo across the galaxy. "We need to hit their homeworld," Aiden said, his voice steady but resolute. "We need to send a message that humanity won't be pushed around. We can't just defend Earth, we need to take the fight to the Zelthians." Alara looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Are you suggesting we attack the heart of the Zelthian Empire?" "I am," Aiden said without hesitation. "We can't keep running. It's time to make them understand that Earth is not a world to be controlled. If we strike at the heart of their power, we can force the Council to reconsider their stance. We have to show them we're willing to fight to the last breath." Alara studied him for a long moment, her gaze sharp. Then she gave a small nod. "You're right. We can't wait for them to come to us. We'll make them regret underestimating humanity." The decision was made. Earth would strike at the Zelthian heart, and this time the stakes would be higher than ever. Aiden felt the weight of that decision settle in his chest, but there was no turning back. The battle for humanity's future had only just begun. The decision to strike at the heart of the Zelthian Empire was not made lightly. It weighed heavily on every person in the room. But Alara Miles, the general who had led Earth's forces through the first devastating encounter, knew it was the only way to show the galaxy that humanity would not back down. The briefing room buzzed with activity as the final preparations for the mission were set in motion. Earth's fleet, though battered from the previous battles, was now reinforced with new weaponry, stealth technologies, and several smaller, faster ships designed for covert operations. The human forces had learned a great deal in the past few days, and now they were ready to carry the fight directly to the Zelthian homeworld. Aiden Cole stood beside Alara, looking over the holographic map of the Zelthian Empire. Their target was the heart of Zelthian power, a massive fortress planet surrounded by heavily guarded space stations. The fortress itself was a symbol of the Empire's might, a heavily fortified world that had never been breached. But now the human fleet was going to make its move. The stakes could not have been higher. If they failed, Earth would be exposed to the full wrath of the Council and the Zelthians. But if they succeeded, the entire galaxy would know that humanity could not be ignored or trampled on. "We've only got one shot at this," Alara said, her voice low but filled with resolve. "If we hit them hard enough, they'll have no choice but to reconsider their position. We show them what happens when they push us too far." Aiden nodded, his mind racing with the weight of the mission. "How many ships are we sending?" "We've gathered as much as we can," Alara replied. "Around 20 warships with full support from the underground fleet. We've got stealth capabilities, advanced plasma cannons, and every weapon we can bring to bear. It's enough to make a dent, but we'll need to hit them before they can fully respond." Aiden couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the magnitude of the operation. It was a desperate move, one that could change the course of the war. But it was also their best chance. If they could strike fast and hard, they might just catch the Zelthians off guard. If they failed, Earth's position in the galaxy would be forever compromised. "I'm ready," Aiden said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling within him. "Let's do this." Alara's eyes met his, and for a moment there was no need for words. They both understood what was at stake. This wasn't just about winning a battle. It was about sending a message that humanity could never again be looked down upon or dismissed. The fleet left Earth's orbit under the cover of night, slipping silently into the void of space. The vastness of the galaxy stretched out before them, cold and unfeeling. The human fleet was a small force, but they moved with purpose and determination. The Zelthian Empire, once a symbol of overwhelming power, now had a formidable enemy to reckon with. As the fleet moved deeper into Zelthian territory, Aiden's thoughts drifted back to the early days of the conflict. He remembered the words of the Council's emissaries, the threats that had been made. They had promised Earth's destruction if they didn't comply. And now the Council was about to learn just how dangerous it was to push humanity to the brink. Ilara stood at the command center, her eyes focused on the screens as the fleet entered the Zelthian-controlled space. Aiden joined her, watching as their stealth ships darted ahead, the first wave of their attack. "They won't know we're coming until it's too late," Ilara said, her voice calm and confident. "We've got the advantage of surprise, let's use it." Aiden couldn't help but feel the tension build. The plan was simple: hit fast, hit hard, and escape before the Zelthians could mount a proper defense. The human fleet would break through their defenses, strike at the heart of the fortress planet, and then retreat. It was a risky move, but it was their only option. As they approached the fortress planet, the massive space stations and defense platforms surrounding it came into view. The Zelthian defenses were formidable, with dozens of heavily armed ships and countless defensive turrets. But the human fleet, with its advanced stealth capabilities, was able to slip past the outer defenses undetected. "Now's the time," Ilara said. "Engage at full power." In an instant, the human fleet surged forward, launching a barrage of plasma blasts at the nearest Zelthian space station. The explosions rippled through the dark void of space, lighting up the blackness with violent bursts of energy. The Zelthian ships and stations retaliated quickly, launching their own weapons toward the approaching human fleet. But the humans were faster, more agile. They darted in and out of the Zelthian defenses, using their smaller ships to flank the enemy and target weak points. The Zelthian defenses, though strong, weren't prepared for the speed and precision of the human attack. Aiden watched as the battle unfolded before him. The human ships were moving with a level of coordination and determination that he had never seen before. This wasn't just about survival. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity could fight back, that they wouldn't be bullied or silenced. The first major explosion rang out as one of the Zelthian space stations erupted in a massive fireball. The blast sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet, disorienting their forces and creating an opening for the human ships to slip through. The Zelthians scrambled to regroup, but it was too late. The humans were already deep within their defenses, cutting through their forces with surgical precision. "Keep the pressure on them," Ilara ordered, her voice calm but commanding. "We need to break their will, not just their ships." The human fleet pressed forward, relentlessly hammering the Zelthians with wave after wave of devastating attacks. Each blast, each strike, sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet. The once imposing Zelthian fortress planet now seemed vulnerable, exposed. As the battle raged on, Aiden could see the tide turning in humanity's favor. The Zelthians, for all their strength, were not prepared for the ferocity of the human assault. They had underestimated the determination of Earth's forces, and now they were paying the price. But just as victory seemed within reach, the Zelthian reinforcements arrived. A massive fleet of Zelthian warships appeared from the shadows, emerging from hidden stations and slipstreams. The Zelthians had called in their last reserves, and their ships were powerful, heavily armed, and numerous. The balance of the battle shifted once more. "They're bringing in reinforcements," Aiden said, his voice tight with concern. "We can't keep this up much longer." Ilara's face hardened. "We'll make it work. We just need to hit them one more time. The fortress is within range." The human fleet pressed on, knowing that this was their moment. They had to destroy the heart of the Zelthian Empire, or all of their efforts would be for nothing. The plasma blasts continued to rain down, tearing through the enemy's defenses. The battle had reached its peak, and the humans would not back down. As the final strike was launched at the heart of the Zelthian fortress, Aiden felt a surge of triumph. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time in the war, it felt like humanity had the upper hand. The moment the final strike hit the Zelthian fortress, it felt like the universe itself held its breath. A massive explosion ripped through the heart of the Zelthian homeworld's defenses, sending shockwaves that resonated through the entire galaxy. The once unshakable fortress, the symbol of their empire's might, shattered under the force of humanity's vengeance. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. The galaxy would know that humanity could no longer be ignored, that Earth would not fall under the boot of the Zelthians or the Galactic Council. The human fleet, battered but resolute, pulled back quickly. They had struck at the heart of the enemy, but they knew they couldn't stay for long. The reinforcements from the Zelthians were relentless, and the human fleet was already low on resources and ammunition. The next few minutes were a race against time, as the fleet retreated into the cover of deep space, hoping that the damage they had caused would be enough to force the Zelthians to rethink their approach. Aiden Cole stood in the command center, staring at the screens as the battle raged behind them. His heart was still racing from the chaos of the fight. He had seen things he never thought possible: human ships dodging enemy fire, weapons fired with deadly precision, and the massive explosion that had torn through the heart of the Zelthian fortress. But even in the midst of victory, there was a gnawing feeling in his chest. The Zelthians were not finished. They would not simply give up after this. The Council, too, would retaliate. The galaxy was watching, and there was no telling how the tide would turn next. "We did it," Alara Miles said, her voice calm but filled with the relief of battle. She stood beside Aiden, her eyes glued to the monitors. "But it's not over yet. We've got to get out of here before their reinforcements catch up with us." Aiden nodded but didn't take his eyes off the screens. The human fleet was moving, retreating into the vast expanse of space. But behind them, the remnants of the Zelthian fleet were already regrouping, their ships darting through space like enraged hornets. "We've made them bleed," Alara continued, her voice firm. "Now we just need to get back to Earth and prepare for what's next." Aiden's mind raced. The victory over the Zelthian fortress was significant, but it was just one battle. The Council would not let this defeat slide. They would bring down everything they had to crush humanity once and for all. Earth's defense was barely holding together, and they had no illusions about what was coming next. The command center was filled with activity as orders were given to the fleet. The retreat had to be swift and calculated, but as the fleet moved further away from the Zelthian homeworld, the full scale of the consequences began to sink in. Humanity had made a powerful enemy, and the Zelthians were not ones to forgive or forget. "We need to call for backup," Aiden said, turning to Alara. "We need every ally we can get, and we need them now. The Zelthians are not going to let us walk away from this." Alara's eyes met his, and for a moment it was clear that both of them were thinking the same thing. It wasn't just about defeating the Zelthians. It was about convincing the rest of the galaxy that humanity was a force that could not be ignored. If they didn't rally their allies now, humanity would face the full wrath of the Council and the Zelthians. "I've already sent out the requests," Alara said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of the responsibility they were all shouldering. "The Terran coalition is our best bet, but I don't know if they'll come. They're hesitant. They don't want to risk their fleets." "Then we make them understand that it's not just about us," Aiden replied, his voice firm. "This is about the future of the galaxy. If the Council succeeds in crushing humanity, who's next? The Sarnak Syndicate? The Vrix Commonwealth? We have to make them see that Earth is not just another pawn." A moment of silence passed between them. It was a truth neither of them could escape. The Council's reach stretched far beyond Earth, and if humanity fell, the rest of the galaxy would follow. This wasn't just about saving Earth. It was about changing the balance of power in the galaxy forever. As the fleet moved deeper into the black void of space, the final remnants of the Zelthian fleet gave chase. The human ships were fast, but the Zelthians were not far behind. The battle had only just begun. Back on Earth, the people waited. The fate of their world hung in the balance. The battle over the Zelthian fortress had been a victory, but it had come at a high cost. The message had been sent to the Council, but now it was a waiting game. Would the rest of the galaxy respond? Would the Terran coalition, the Sarnak Syndicate, and the smaller factions that Earth had hoped to rally come to their aid? Or would they abandon humanity to the mercy of the Zelthians and the Council? In the streets of Earth's major cities, people gathered in groups, watching the news broadcasts and holding their breath. The tension was palpable. Earth had shown its strength, but no one knew what the next move would be. The message from Alara Miles came through to Earth's government early the next morning. "We're not out of danger yet," she said over the comms. "We've done damage to the Zelthian Empire, but they won't let us walk away from this. We need every fleet we can get. Prepare for reinforcements." The words were simple, but they sent a wave of fear through the people of Earth. The Council would not let this go unanswered. And if Earth's allies didn't come through, humanity would be alone in a galaxy that had already been stacked against them. But despite the fear, there was also a sense of hope. A sense that, for the first time in centuries, Earth had shown the galaxy that it would no longer be treated like a second-class power. The victory had been hard-won, but it had sent a message. The galaxy would have to take Earth seriously from now on. As the human fleet continued its retreat, the Council's response began to take shape. The emissaries of the Council had already called for an emergency meeting, and rumors spread that they were considering a full-scale retaliation. The Zelthians, enraged and wounded, were planning their next move. Aiden stood in the command center once more, staring at the endless expanse of space. The fleet had escaped, but they weren't safe yet. Earth was in the crosshairs, and the galaxy was watching. There was no telling what would happen next, but one thing was certain. Humanity had already changed the course of galactic history. They had shown that Earth could fight. They had shown that humanity would not be silenced. It was time for the galaxy to listen. The war was far from over, but humanity had already proven its strength.